Good afternoon, everybody. Let's get this meeting going. It is June 29th, 12:30. This is the Legal and Finance Committee meeting. Start this off with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Drew. Here. Lehman.
Here.
Nordstrom.
Here.
Weifenbach. Solomon.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Next up is adoption of the agenda. Motion by Solomon, second by Drew. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. General public comment. I don't have anybody that wishes to speak. I think you're all city staff out there. Consent items 1 through 10. Would the directors like to pull any particular items and discuss them before we take any action? Mr. Biegler?
Yes, if I may, I would like to pull item number 9 for discussion.
Okay.
And if I may go ahead.
Please.
All right. This is a request to donate land in the Johnson Ranch subdivision to the city for the purposes of a city park. There's two pieces of land that are adjoining that comprise about 1.3 acres. It would be a green space for mostly for the residents of that subdivision, that they'd be able just to walk down and enjoy the green space. It's also then would be a city park, which would be available for anybody in the community to use. Part of the caveat on this donation is that the city would pay for all of the development costs to turn this piece of property into a park. So we are asking, 1, to accept the donation, and 2, to identify a funding source for development.
Thank you, Mr. Biegler. Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, as you know, I'm very concerned about what the ongoing maintenance and upkeep and everything of the park. So I applaud you for looking for additional revenue sources for the development of the park. But I'm concerned about the ongoing maintenance and everything that goes along with that once we get it. And I'm in support of that. Would like to see us get it. But are we able to, on your current budget, are we able to continue with the ongoing maintenance of additional parks, not just this one, but other parks that we're looking at as well?
Well, you know, that would be a great problem to have if we had more and more parks coming our way, to be able to try to figure out a way to maintain them. But this particular parcel would not have a significant additional strain on our personnel resources. As I say, it's a pretty small parcel. The maintenance would largely consist of turf mowing and irrigation repair at this point. Down the road, it would be nice to add a small piece of play equipment there, and that's about all that you could put on this parcel due to its size. So I think right now we'd be in good shape for ongoing maintenance of this facility should the council decide to accept it.
Yeah, I hope we do, because it's definitely needed in this area. So look forward to seeing what the rest of my colleagues have to say about it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Chair. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Nordstrom. Mr. Solomon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Biegler, if I may, Mr. Chair, direct a
course.
question to Mr. Biegler. What's the nearest park to this location?
Well, it's quite some distance. I would say probably the nearest park would be the Star of the West complex, which would be north of this site, across St. Patrick and up between St. Patrick and Highway 44 on Sudovy Lane. That's more of a softball and lacrosse area, and not really a neighborhood park per se. It doesn't have any play equipment or things like that. So other than that, yeah, it's a good distance probably to the nearest park. I'd say probably Robbinsdale would be the nearest large park to this location. But as we know, there's a lot of growth going to the east and to the southeast, and it's going to be an area that we are going to have to find opportunities for park property, and this would be a good start.
Okay. Remind me of the parcel that's being requested? What size is it?
It is, there are two adjoining parcels, and I think they total about 1.31 acres.
What's the average parcel size for a park in Rapid City?
Quite a bit larger than that.
Is that enough room for a bunch of neighborhood kids to play, I wonder?
You know, it's something.
Okay,
It is-
something.
It's a green space for people.
Would it
to,
be our smallest park if we got it?
It'd be right there with the smallest parks. We have a couple of small parks that are just mostly folks from the neighborhood walk down and use. And you know, I'm thinking Scott Mallow Park or the Legion Park, things like that. But certainly, any park is a welcome park to those that are able to get to it and use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Chair, may I direct a question to Director Fisher?
Of course.
Director Fisher, when you are in the planning process and you consider green space and parks and things like that, how does this view in with the plans that your team has identified for the area?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Fisher?
So thank you for asking the question. I actually queued up to speak next, just to bring a little history to this site. As you may recall, when Johnson Ranch was originally being platted, the developer at the time requested that some of the lots have a reduced lot size, and in lieu of that, that they would provide a public park. So about 2/3 of this acreage has been identified for parkland more recently before your public hearings. And when you recently approved an apartment development directly north and east of this parkland, you had many residents in the area concerned that over the years this park isn't being brought into fruition and when is it going to be completed, et cetera. And so Councilman Evans and Councilman Jones visited with staff, visited with the developer. I believe that they met with several of the property owners in the area. They then spoke with the developer about donating the lot to the north that was going to be a future residential lot, and if they would donate the 2 parcels to the city, that they would then visit with Mr. Bigler about him accepting it as parkland. This neighborhood is waiting. They want to see and make sure that a park does get built and that it does have amenities. They want to see, at one time was going to have a basketball court, walking trail, and maybe a small playground equipment. And so they're still looking for those. And so I'm glad that Director Bigler is requesting where does the funding source, because I think sooner than later, they're going to be back in here visiting with you folks about where are these amenities. The reason that this is on your agenda is because the apartment development has a stipulation that says they cannot get a certificate of occupancy until a plan development has been submitted for review and approval for the park. It is the hope of the developer that if the city takes on this responsibility, we will then support an amendment to remove that stipulation, knowing that the city is going to take the lead on owning and providing the park amenities.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bigler, just, Mr. Chair, for maybe Mr. Bigler once more. We have not identified a funding source, so the proposal was brought forward by the council members and with your support, but is there a recommended funding source? I didn't see anything.
I do not have a recommended funding source. I know that we do not have the funds currently in our capital improvement plan to fund the improvements there.
Okay. That, I think it's a great idea. Obviously, we like parks and green space. I think this not being brought forward with a recommended funding source is enough for me to say I probably would support at least sending this to council without recommendation or continuing it 2 weeks until a funding source is identified by those who are bringing it forward. I think that's always good practice when we bring forward things to attach a funding source for us to consider. And so as it stands right now, I'm supportive of the project, but not without a funding source. So with that, I'll yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Vicki, did you have anything else to add?
I did. This is a very time-sensitive request. The property of the apartments is now owned by a different developer, and he's getting close to needing those certificates of occupancy. If it is the belief of Mr. Bigler that a funding source could be identified by Monday, it might be to our advantage to not hamper his project by sending this to council without recommendation. But again, if we don't have any idea where that might come from, it may not matter if we send it forward or wait 2 weeks.
Ms. Fisher, Mr. Nordstrom, did you have anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The way I'm reading this agenda item is to direct staff to work with Dream Design and then identify a funding source. So that's the way I'm reading the agenda, is that we are just now directing staff rather than the reverse. So I would support the motion to send this to council so that we are directing staff. And I look to the Parks Director and also the Planning Director to see if I'm in error of this, my reading of what the agenda item is saying.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Fisher?
So I think the language of the request is to direct staff to accept this as parkland, but it's also for council to identify the funding source. And maybe that's something that Councilman Evans and Councilman Jones are working on. So maybe sending it to council without recommendation, they would be able to answer that Monday night.
Mr. Solomon, do you have another?
Were you done? Okay. So I'll make a motion to move this to council without recommendation in hopes that the council will identify a funding source at that time, if I can get a second.
Motion by Solomon. Second by Nordstrom to move to council without recommendation. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And we're jumping around today, Darla. The directors want to discuss any other items? Well, you're welcome to chair, ma'am. So I will entertain a motion to approve the balance of consent without number 9. Motion by Nordstrom, second by Drew. All in favor? Any opposed? And item number 11, second reading and recommendation of ordinance 6542 regarding supplemental appropriation number 2 for 2022. Motion by Drew, second by Nordstrom. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Solomon, second by Drew. All in favor? And we're adjourned.